Hi, this is Nadine from Save a Million Cents, and today's question is a little bit different. I was asked where I drew my financial know-how and savviness from, and whether it was from my Jordanian roots or otherwise. So the answer is no. I have not drawn my financial know-how or my financial education from my Jordanian roots. So I was born in Jordan and I left to Australia on my own at age 23. In Jordan, I my role model and my forever role model is my mom. This necklace is from her, so that's why I'm wearing it to answer this question. So my mom was just pretty much very unconventional. She is a businesswoman in the Middle East. She's not covered and she just speaks her mind. She is an architect, therefore, she actually is in a man's world because it is the Middle East and it is engineering. So she has set the bar really high up for me because as a kid, I would watch her, the way she carried herself, the way she broke out of conventional employment and started her own business out of nothing and all of that. So that was a very big example and role model for me. However, I never really asked her how she managed her money. And being in my 20s or even my late teens in Jordan, we did have a very sheltered upbringing. So it's not like I was able to live outside of my parental, house or any of that. We don't do that in Jordan. However, I did manage to break free at age 23 and I got the hell out of there and moved to Australia on my own. That was when my education began. Because at that point, I moved to Australia with a student visa. And at the time, still is the situation on a student visa, you're only allowed to work 20 hours a week during when school is in progress, in process, whatever. So when school is happening during semester, you only have 20 hours a week. And then during holidays, if you're in Australia, if you're not like back home or whatever, you can work as many hours as you want. This is a good and a bad thing, but that's not what we're talking about right now. So at age 23, right out of my parents' or my mother's house, I suddenly found myself needing to become financially savvy and know how to make my money last as long as possible. At the time, my real strong financial influence was my dad. And his idea of financial savviness was not spending money and being really, really cheap. So that was the thing I fell back on back then. I was like, okay, I'm going to be very cheap and eat cheap food and have cheap rent and buy cheap clothes. It was horrible. Like, I don't want to go back there ever again. And it is really out of reaction. But back then I was, around 20 years ago, 17 years ago. So where I was back then and where I am now are two different stories. And if you're still like, if you're there, there's no shame. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you know, whether it's you're mimicking your parental figures' behaviors with money or it's a reaction. Because sometimes I get clients that are like really big spenders and it's because their parents were really tight asses. So the way that we manage our finances, especially in our 20s, either mimics or is in opposition to what we learned as children. So that's not what I learned from. However, it was my first influence. But my real my real like financial education started when I was living alone and trying to manage myself. And then I went and lived in France for a couple of years. And I'm a money nerd. That's what I am. So I really, really observe and watch how different cultures react, feel, talk about money. So, how like most cultures talking about money is a taboo. So I always observed that in my travels. So I lived in France and I traveled around Europe and I was just looking and how things different things cost differently and how just money is treated and talked about in very different ways in the European culture. Then I moved back to Australia. That was in 2011. And that's when I got a really good job. And that's when I really had to kind of rein it in and understand. And that's when I started reading personal finance books. And my friends are in they're 20 years older than me. So they kind of imparted their own wisdom. So it really is a hodgepodge of all of that back then. And then I lived in the US. That changed everything because the way Americans feel, treat, and discuss money and debt is completely different to Australia, Europe, and the Middle East. So now that I have the Middle Eastern background, then the European, the Australian background, I added the American point of view on top of that. So I was there, I was observing, I was looking, I lived in a couple of states there. Every state has a different money energy and mindset, especially living in Louisiana. That was different. People live for the day, like there's no tomorrow, that the reckless spending, um, the fixation on alcohol and instant gratification was big there. I'm not criticizing, just observing. So I learned a lot from that, and then moved to New Mexico where people are more conservative, where the prices were a little bit lower, tax was a little bit lower than where it was in Louisiana. So again, that money mindset was very different when I worked. And throughout all of that, I was always working in accounting. So I was always working in some capacity or another with money. So I had access to my colleagues' brains and how they talked about money and how they, you know, talked about their own finances. So I drew up on that. So that's basically my background. Then in 2015, that's when I created my own value-based spending strategy. This is what I teach in my programs. It's something that I created. And it's basically aligning your money with your values and your goals. And then I started teaching that in workshops across here in Melbourne. Then I moved to America. And then I got distracted by other things. Then I got my financial coaching certificate. That didn't really inform my money perspective, but it really helped me create a business around it. And then I got certified in using money archetypes. So it's more behavioral finance, behavioral economics, and money. And that is like this certification was probably better than any certification that I've ever had, including my postgrad and my bachelor. That was great. That was through the Money Coaching Institute. And I learned a lot from it. It shaped the way that I now handle money and the way I help my clients handle money, but also given and drawing from my cultural background and also my background from my parental figures, which is pretty much scarcity and financial abuse. Drawing up on that is actually what created what is now my own perspective on money, my own perspective on how money and spirituality can actually become stronger together. So it's one of my things is that I teach you the practical side of money. I teach you why you behave with money the way you do, and then how to bring your spirituality into your money to make it more holistic, and how your money will help you, how it will help propel you forward into more of a life purpose kind of perspective. So that's my financial origins, the origins of my financial education. It's a hodgepodge of everything. So it really is very, very Nadine specific. I'll write a book one day, but for now, hope this video was entertaining. See ya.